I've just watched a report from Sky News. It stated the 25th of July. I'll put the link in the video. And it's really revealing about the sort of situation that particularly metropolitan police officers face. But I dare say it's a similar situation in other urban areas. I imagine Greater Manchester Police, West Yorkshire Police, Scotland Police in Glasgow, and Merseyside Police. Basically, any urban area, but particularly the Metropolitan Police. West Midlands Police won't face these sort of situations because it's just really something that I think people need to consider when they're looking at the current discourse of, for want of a better term, the debate around racism and racial issues in this country. Because the protests of June have absolutely shifted to this country. All those sort of culture wars issues around racial issues in particular and policing have come here um, in a very big way. And it's not that they weren't here before, I'm not saying that, but they've definitely become more pronounced in the last 2 months. Basically, this report, about 6 minutes long, it really shows how difficult it is for frontline officers. So it showed them apprehending, or rather questioning, a black teenager in Haringey, which is one of London's most troubled boroughs for crime. And almost immediately, people start gathering around, black people asking, why are they arresting him? Why are they questioning him? It's racist, bro. Um, and the officer said at the end of the video, this just gets exhausting every single time, having to explain to 20 individuals that it isn't what they think it is. Um, and it all comes down to this thing about this debate around stop and search. You know, I admit I've changed my stance on this. About 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I would have been dead set against it. At that time, my view was, well, you can't stop people just on their ethnicity or their age. That sort of profiling is wrong. But frankly, I was wrong. I was naive because I didn't consider the sort of situation the police are in. I mean, think about this. If they have a description, a young black guy, say around 15, 16 years old, he's running away, he has, let's say, a green top on. Let's say he's got a baseball cap. Um, does it really make sense for the police to then stop an 80-year-old Indian woman or a 60-year-old white woman, or for that matter, a 60-year-old black woman? No, because that isn't the description that they're working with. There was a youth worker interviewed, and predictably, he came down very much in the whole victimization narrative. Um, he acknowledged the police are in a demanding job, but then he went on to say, oh, they don't listen to our grievances, they don't listen to the community. And why is it that 80% of people stop their young black men, but they're the minority of the population? But he's not correlating the fact that in London, the simple fact of the matter is the majority of those involved in knife crime are young black men. That's where the correlation lies. It's not an indication of racism because more black guys are stopped. I'm not going to say there's never been institutional racism in this country, in the police. I think there have probably been examples of profound racism. But I honestly believe, from numerous documentaries I've seen, numerous studies that I've looked at, not in depth, but you see where the trajectory lies. And it lies in a police culture that has definitely changed over the last 30 years. Say from the mid 80s, like the Broadwater farm riots in Tottenham. I really do believe that policing culture has changed since then. Start, there are a lot more minority officers, which is very important because obviously, if you have a situation where you have, let's say, 99% white officers policing a 99% black community, obviously there's going to be tensions. So the natural answer to this, and American forces have faced similar questions, is make the police more diverse. I'm totally in support of that. It makes total sense. But that's happened. The police have become more diverse. Every force has conscientiously made an effort to do that. So, my question for Black Lives Matter and Black youth workers is you're making all these demands of the police. How about just for once, not only considering the position that they're in, but actually acknowledge that there is an issue of crime in the black community and acknowledge that the police are tasked with dealing with that? Because in the end of the day, most of the victims are black as well. So it's just an absurd situation where the police are constantly being vilified as racist in every incident. Okay, people don't bother to consider the circumstances of that case. They just assume, oh well, police are stopping a black guy, it must be racist, even if it's Asian or black officers. It's just such a shackling thing. How can the police operate in those circumstances where every time they stop a black guy, because of the information they have, they run the risk of a mob gathering around to yell at them, call them racist, and obstruct them doing their job? I mean, I think they should be polite about it in the off chance that they've got the wrong person. I wouldn't like to be stopped for something I hadn't done. And incidentally, it did happen to me once. It was late at night. I was cycling home from Spar. I'd bought some, can't remember what it was, but it was quite late at night, and I was stopped. And the officer was quite polite. He basically said there'd been some burglaries in the area, and a guy had been seen on a bike. Well, I had an alibi. I clearly had my shopping bag. It said Spar on it, and that was that. I was a little uneasy about it, but I thought, okay, well, it is late. He's doing his job. Frankly, there's some uncomfortable, politically incorrect truths about this, and one of them, and I know I run the risk of being smeared as a racist for saying this, but frankly, there is a very, very defensive attitude from a lot of the black community, which is every single time a black suspect is arrested or questioned, they immediately shout racism, with no basis that that is the motivation. Because there has been a history of racism, they think, oh, well, it must be racist. I mean, the youth worker's contradicting himself. He acknowledges that there is a problem with black crime, and yet he's questioning why the police stop black suspects. My question to that guy would be, what exactly do you want the police to do? You say they're not talking to people, but that's exactly what they were doing. In many parts of the world, if they were arresting a suspect and a group gathered round, they would not be politely trying to reason with the group. They would be, all hell would break loose. They'd be opening fire in many parts of the world. So, frankly, I think, and I don't like to talk about communities because I don't think you can generalize people in that way, but within the black population, frankly, there is a widespread defensiveness and a refusal to just accept that there is a problem with crime within the black community and just say, we have this problem, instead of constantly vilifying the police and smearing them as racists. Why don't we actually work with them? Because black citizens don't want to be victims of crime any more than anyone else. I just think that the police have their hands tied. Even the youth worker acknowledged that. He said they're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't. But then he went on to basically show why, because of his attitude. So I sort of felt like he was trying to be a bit sort of PC for the cameras, but it's attitudes like his that are making their job harder because he is not he's not explaining how they should talk to the community. Is he really going to say, we've got this problem with young black men being stabbed? Oh, but if the police question young black men who are doing it, that's racism. What does he expect the police to do? And this is something that I think people are overlooking. Black Lives Matter certainly overlooks it. One of my main critiques of Black Lives Matter in the UK is they're not vocal on gang violence. They'll occasionally mention it. They'll say, "Oh yeah, that's a problem." Their entire focus is on police racism and societal racism and colonial wrongs. And they want to focus on the transatlantic slave trade 200 years ago instead of issues going on today. I really think it's a fundamentally dishonest movement in a lot of ways. For one thing, they portray every single incident as motivated by racism. Now, how can the police be expected to do their job? Imagine you're a police officer. You see a young black man that fits the description that you've been given by the shopkeeper or by the concerned resident or whoever it is. Are you just going to ignore that person? Then you wouldn't be doing your job. But in doing your job, then you're going to run the risk of an angry group of locals gathering around and yelling in your face and calling you a racist. I mean, in the same video, it showed that one thing they have to deal with is illegal parties. Um, they're illegal. It's just this cavalier attitude to law breaking, and I really think that it's one of the biggest problems we have is this attitude that breaking the law is somehow okay, that the whole focus should be aimed at the police instead of actually people who are knowingly breaking the law. These youth workers, I don't want to be too critical because they are dedicating their lives to helping young people as they see it. I think they're dead wrong about a lot of the positions they have. I don't think that they fully understand the position the police are in. They make a lot of demands, but how much ground are they actually willing to see? How much are they actually willing to say, well, yeah, I understand the police's point on that? As far as I can see, all Black Lives Matter does is make demands and promote grievances and promote a victimhood narrative. And no matter what the police do, they will be accused of racism. And this comes down to an attitude. It comes down to an attitude of victimhood. Instead of taking some damn responsibility and saying, well, actually, instead of assuming that this young black guy being questioned is a victim of racism, why not assume, okay, well, maybe he was guilty. Maybe he was running away. Why was he running away? An innocent person wouldn't run away. I just think there's a lot of questions that are being overlooked. And I think one of the biggest problems here, I mean, okay, Sky News has covered this, but so much of the media narrative over the past few months has been jumping over itself to pander to the narrative of Black Lives Matter. And anyone who questions them runs the risk of being called a racist, especially if you're white. But it's really frustrating because I'm not even a Londoner, and it saddens me to see what's happened to our capital. Where is the focus on drill music? Where is the focus on gang culture? Why is it taboo to question drill music? Oh no, you can't do that. It's just their art. They're just expressing themselves. It's perfectly okay for drill artists to boast about stabbing people. Oh no, it's just their art. Can't question it. So frankly, I have a lot of sympathy with the Metropolitan Police in this sort of area. I'm not saying they're above criticism. I'm not saying that there aren't examples of the police, for example, engaging in nanny state techniques. I mean, I'm not happy about the fact, for example, police will spend a lot of time policing so-called thought crimes on the internet. Someone said something offensive, let's go to the front door, and they're quite hard line on that. That's a big problem. Um, then there are other officers who really do take risks, and officers have died in the line of duty in this country. We saw recently in the case of PC Andrew Harper, and now in that case, those who done it were white travellers. So again, that's an area where political correctness gets in the way of an honest debate about the traveller community and about crime there and education and a lot of issues around that. One thing that I really feel very, very strongly with on the issue of crime is there is far, far too much ground given to the sensitivities of people who think that not offending a community is more important than protecting the public. It's not. That's not to say it's not important. Of course, it's important to have strong trust and strong community relations with the police. But I really think that, you know, these youth workers and these BLM activists that constantly use the victimhood narrative, us, us, us. It's entirely self-centered. Where's their consideration for people being plagued by knife crime? Where's their consideration for officers who have to deal with this every single day? As far as I can see, all that comes from their narrative is demands and yells of racism. You don't win an argument by smearing someone as a racist without basis for it. And that's something I also think's been massively missing in this country. Too often, too often, when the charge of racism is thrown out, it's just accepted as fact. And the media, in my view, is very guilty of this because they will not, they will talk about racism in such a way as to not not say there's been this problem with racism. They will take the charge of racism as racism in and of itself. Just because a Black Lives Matter activist yells racism doesn't mean that there is racism in that particular circumstance. And that is something that has been totally, totally distorted. It's very dangerous, actually, because you might actually have a situation where police officers, they're human beings, they might then be reluctant to get involved. During the England riots in 2011, I think they totally abandoned Hackney for 1 or 2 nights. I saw a documentary where they just didn't go in, and this is just wrong. We need to have a turnaround where there's a recognition that the police have a job, protect the public, and enforce the law. Enforce the law. That's the bit that's being overlooked. That's their job. That's their role. And frankly, I'm sick and tired of some youth workers and social activists ignoring that part. They don't seem to have an understanding or a respect for the fact that laws are there for a reason. That society breaks down when people just do whatever they like. Where is their condemnation of crime? I'm sick and tired of hearing the never ending victimhood narrative without a condemnation of crime. Because it doesn't exist, or it's minimal at least. And I think, this government certainly is a right wing government. It's Priti Patel would certainly be on the side of the police. But the media, frankly, I think they've been far, far too keen to pander to Black Lives Matter. Because there's this mentality that because they shout loudly and because they say we're the victims, you must listen to us, you must obey our demands, that they're somehow owed something. Instead of taking it as a debate, it's taken as a given. Like, okay, well, we better just say what they want to hear and do what they want, you know, cave into the demands. They've got no responsibility. Videos like this, where I try to be very honest, I'm also very aware that, particularly with race, it is such a sensitive subject. People's reputations have been destroyed. It sickens me, to be honest, that we can't have an honest debate about this because it is such a weaponized term. And the likes of Afua Hirsch and there's others, you know, They just throw it out at anyone who disagrees with them. Um, if you're smearing someone as a racist, how can you expect them to have dialogue? You know, you've demonized them. How can they have dialogue if you are putting them in a position where no matter what they say, you will say, oh, it's called colonialist? Of course, there are people within the black community who are well aware of this and they do speak out, but they then get denounced as somehow being traitors to the cause. A young woman, Esther Karaku, who's of Ghanaian descent, she has been very vocal on these things. And, you know, I really respect her for that. I respect anyone who sticks their head out and is actually prepared to be honest. Sir Trevor Phillips is another example. These are people who are not interested in political correctness, they're interested in honesty. And to be quite honest, I think there is a lack of honesty from the black community. Too many people within the black community who will not say, well, there's a problem with crime, it needs to be dealt with. Instead, the narrative is, oh, it's all racism. All efforts, all efforts used to combat this is racism, no matter what they do. No matter what they do, the police could literally set up a sort of community building exercise that would be ignored. You know, they could do a sort of community building exercise where they're working with black kids or whatever, but that will be ignored. And the focus will be on another black kid being arrested because he fits the description. So it really angers me that the charge of racism gets so casually thrown around. And if you're one of those people doing it, in my opinion, I don't care if you're white or black. If you're one of those people who is constantly portraying every situation as racist, all you're doing, all you're doing is deepening the divisions in this country. You're not building anything. You're not contributing anything. It's just very sad. I'll put a link to the video.